ways in which people-based approaches impacts and is played out and activated through media, and the ways in which media companies of different kinds, because we have three very different kinds of media companies represented here, how they're trying to satisfy marketers' wishes. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and just start out by reminding everybody which and describe briefly the media properties that you represent.
Sure.
Manny?
Yep. Hi, I'm Manny from Chino's Media, and we are a leading women's lifestyle platform, and we have scale across the web of where we control over 60 million uniques.
And there are multiple brands in Chino's, right?
Yes, so we have our own O&O properties, but then we have exclusive rights to advertise over, I think, 1,400 domains that are in our network.
Okay. And Dana, you come from a niche company called Disney?
Very small. I'm Dana McGraw, and I am representing the Walt Disney Company, and that's inclusive of the Disney Digital Network, which spans across both social and our owned and operated properties, as well as the Disney ABC Television Group.
Okay. And Jay?
Great. I'm Jay Seidemann. I am part of a new company called Oath, and we actually launched a big B2B marketing campaign yesterday in 9 global markets. Oath is the consolidation of Microsoft, digital assets, AOL digital assets, Verizon, and now Yahoo. So Oath is the parent company holding group for all those, what we call house of brands, right. And I run our demand platform business.
So this represents 3 very different kinds of groups. Yours is a highly verticalized one that knows its audience especially well. Yours obviously a set of legacy offline brands that everybody knows very well and represents massive cross-platform scale. Yours, Jay, something a little more of the newer model where we have Verizon sort of helping to agglomerate a lot of different legacy and new media assets to create scale and data. Would each of you start by telling us, as you come into the market, what are the chief challenges that you're facing in talking to media buyers, and simply your chief challenges as businesses and sustainable businesses? Sure, Jay, go ahead. Let's go the other way.
The 2 big trends we're seeing right now, and Oath is, I think, front and center on this, but I'm sure we're all impacted, are consolidation and commoditization. So consolidation, I mean, I just talked about, we're a roll-up of a bunch of different really strong media properties and data assets. So we're front and center on that consolidation. And even in my time at Oath or prior AOL or Microsoft, we were buying companies like Millennial. And acquisitions, consolidation is a big theme, which, the second theme we see that we're all facing is commoditization. And commoditizations happen because, particularly in the platform, and if we're talking about targeting world, commoditization is really, 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of platforms grew up and were developing new features and ways to innovate and buy programmatically that was differentiated. And what we've seen over the last, even 6 to 8 months is a lot of those things that were strengths are really commoditized. It's not really all that different just to have a DSP, just to have a media property, because there's a democratization that's happened for inventory and data. And so I can tell you how we combat that.
Is one helping to drive the other? Is the conglomeration also helping to drive the commoditization? Or is there a solution to it?
Well, I think one probably is driving the other. Like commoditization is leading to consolidation in the industry. But I think what it in the end leads all vendors to is, how do you differentiate? Right. How do you make yourself stand out now that commoditization has happened?
Mm-hmm. Dan?
I think, contributing to that for us, what we see is we're consistently asked about cross-platform and how to address the same consumer across platform. And what does that mean? What does our data mean? And we really, as a company, sort of trade on trust. And so thinking about cross-platform and thinking about how do you address the consumer in a way that the advertiser wants, but be protective of the consumer experience, as well as protective of consumer information. Because we're proud of the first-party data that we have, but we're very precious with it. So how do we sort of address the advertiser needs across platform, but protect the consumer at the same time?
Are you precious with the data because to protect your business, or what's the rationale?
Definitely, because first and foremost for us, I mean, we don't even call them consumers, we call them guests. So for our company, it's about our guest, and that comes first. And I think, that's part of why you want to advertise with us, because there's that level of trust in our environment with our guest. And the environment sort of matters. So are we protective of that environment, protective of the brand, but give advertisers what they need in the process?
Do you feel the pressure of commoditization? I mean, you represent two legacy media brands where you're emphasizing experience, trust. They know they're in the Disney environment. They know they're in the ABC environment. How do you feel that pressure of commoditization on you? Are you still able to establish that sort of shroud of media environment?
I think we are. We've done a really good job of being forward-thinking in terms of our social presence and our mobile data, which really allows us to have something that is somewhat differentiating. We've invested in predictive modeling and machine learning, and because it's our data and because consumers trust us and are willing to tell us more about themselves, it's still differentiating for us.
Jay, how do you come at that? I mean, do you want that same kind of you're representing a conglomeration of brands now under an umbrella of Oath that we're all becoming familiar with. Yeah. Do you aspire to that kind of differentiation and trust and people feeling as if they're within a trusted environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you hear our CEO, Tim Armstrong, speak, he's all about, we don't want to call them users. We don't want to call them the people on our site. I don't know. I think we call them members, actually. Mm-hmm. I kind of like guests. I think Target uses that, too. But we think about our members as, they want a value exchange. They want great services. They want great content. But we can't just throw back, 300 by 250s that are completely irrelevant to them. So we've done a lot of innovation around ad formats with our Gemini system and just in other areas. But we're thinking about how we score advertising, creative. We're thinking about the user experience in every way. And for us right now, it's kind of connecting the pieces so that the logins and the registrations work across platforms, across mobile devices, video, desktop. Mm-hmm. But it's also about how do you get that creative messaging right? Because part of that is also the heavy lifting for building those pipes right is so that you can control frequency. So you're not, you're truly controlling the message that people are seeing, our members are seeing across our properties. And right now that's a big challenge. But when you're operating at the scale we're operating at, and likely Disney, you want to be doing that because you don't want to be completely, you can do things like creative rotation and frequency counting and capping, but also sequencing of messaging. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important thing. And right now the industry doesn't do that at all, even within the same property groups.
And again, that speaks to experience too, is that we just don't have enough focus on the idea of the consumer experience, and that includes whether people feel as if they're within a trusted brand and a specific brand environment, but also if they're being told stories that make sense to them and in a way that they feel comfortable with. Manny, now you represent, yours, She Knows, is in a very different place from these two companies.
Yeah, slightly different. What we have is scale of our loyal audience. Our platform actually is defined as women empowering women, and you guys are very lucky that you have members or guests that are Manny's or the Danas who register, and you can track them across your properties, your portals. We don't have that. I think our audience is loyal to the curated content that we foster in our community and in the platform that we do control and develop and invest over. What we do invest right now in terms of addressing the needs of the advertisers is enabling the transactions to be whatever you need it to be. So whether you want to leverage your own data to overlap with our scale of audience and ensuring that you follow your target audience based on your strategies, whether it's acquisitions or actually promos, we'll make sure to align that with our content curation and ensuring that our first-party segmentation, which is based on context and these editorial in the community, we will strategize with you on how to get there. So,
what do you feel like you're selling? Are you selling an audience or are you selling a context?
Yeah, so we sell audience. Our business model is around scaling more of this audience, and our technology is actually really good at partnering with publishers who are willing to get our technology onto their stack and replacing existing ad tech stacks that they have, in which case our audience gets amplified, and the strategy for those acquisitions revolve around that publisher or content needs to be endemic to our audience pool, typically women, and the influencer, I guess, the social following around that.
And well, I'm glad you raised social because that's my next question. Is before I pivot into the duopoly, how much of your traffic and how much of your economy is dependent on social distribution?
A big portion of it. Part of our execution, actually, to big brands that continue to work with us is we create custom content for them, and we amplify that with our influencer program, where we have partners, social partners in this community who either advocate or, I guess in the branded content world, really promote those kinds of brands into their content themselves, and then we create another landing page for the particular brand so that everyone revolves around that. So social and traffic acquisition from the social channels revolve around that.
Let me ask the same question of both of you. How reliant do you feel in terms of distribution and audience gathering? Are you on social distribution?
We have a great deal of social distribution. Our presence is, I believe we have well over 1 billion followers across all of our social channels at this point, which allows for content creation and storytelling, and then leveraging those platforms to sort of distribute our story, either for ourselves or for a brand. So we're really leveraging that in a really solid way.
How does that impact the other piece of this, which is your media environment? If you're distributing elsewhere onto somebody else's environment, how does that impact your sense of projecting a Disney experience?
Sure. So because our following is what it is, we're addressing Disney enthusiasts to start with, but then we're able to amplify that to others via modeling or other methodology to those who look like them, who behave like them, who might also be interested. So for us, we're still kind of capturing the environment we want to capture because it's our story from us to our followers, so people who understand our brand already, even within those platforms.
Is it important that you're getting them off of these social channels into your environment? Or?
It depends on what line of business we're talking about. Because we're in multiple lines of business, we obviously have an e-commerce business, we have a retail business, we have the parks business. So it really depends on who we're addressing and why, whether it matters if they come out of the platform or not.
Jay, talk about your relationship of your whole ecosystem to the social ecosystem.
Yeah, and someone brought this up when we were talking earlier. The duopoly. I mean, we're really reliant on a lot of the social channels to distribute content. I don't have the exact figure, but Huffington Post, which is one of the properties within Oath, is, I believe, the #1 shared media property on Facebook. So we call it off-network distribution, but there's a pantload of impressions being served and users being served across various social channels. Obviously, Facebook's one of the biggest, but we also create content for Snapchat and everyone else. And I think you can't ignore it because the message is the medium, and you need to be where consumers are, and they're on all those channels.
So let's bring that elephant into the room of the duopoly and how you guys are working within that system. This week we saw eMarketer revised its estimates of how much of digital ad spend would be going to two players. 60%.
What did it say?
60%. Which is upward. Others, like the Digital Content Next and others have estimated that it's worse than that when you simply look at growth. That in fact those two players are eating up almost all.
What's the breakout of Facebook and Google in that?
Google twice as much as Facebook. So we are still talking about it. We're still talking about, and one might argue that Google loves that Facebook's getting all this attention because it deflects attention away from how big Google actually is.
You said it.
But let me ask you. I'll share one chilling anecdote and ask you guys to jump in on this. We hold an annual event every year in Washington after the elections for political marketers. And last year, right after the election, or earlier this year after the election, we had the RNC, Team Trump, Team Hillary, DNC, all there talking about their media spend for the last election. All they talked about was Facebook. That's all to the point where others in the room, other publishers and media buyers, asked throughout the day, did you buy anywhere else? To which they responded, no, why bother? Which was chilling, I think, to anybody in the media ecosystem. That when it came to analytics, when it came to targeting, when it came to effectiveness and impact, and their ability to measure and justify their ROI, nobody else came close. Now, obviously, it's an extreme example. That's political marketing. They have a very specific set of goals in mind. But I'm curious, as publishers, how are you encountering, first of all, when you go to market on sales calls, how do you encounter and experience the duopoly? What kind of pushback are you getting from the people you're selling about the power of these two companies and why media buyers are opting for them and whether they are?
We've really taken the approach of embracing the partnership. So for us, we're a part of the Facebook Anthology program. We've talked a lot about that. We recently launched Club Mickey Mouse with Facebook, with HP as a sponsor, as well as Science and Star Wars on the same platform with IBM as a sponsor. So we're sort of embracing the partnership, and we're sort of not in this fight of their money or our money. We're embracing the partnership. We understand the platform and the ability to distribute really high-quality content. So we're coming to it from that perspective of this is a partnership. We have great data to bring to the table as a part of that partnership. We see how our data performs when we're combined with a Facebook or another social platform. We have very good research and understanding of which of our audiences live on what platform and how to target them appropriately. So for us, it's really about partnership.
Mm-hmm. Jay?
I don't know if we're combating it at all. In fact, I think we're benefiting from it because I think a lot of buyers, at least the bigger buyers who want to mass market, don't want to be pigeonholed into a single solution or two solutions. And so I don't know that we're combating it or if we're benefiting from it, because a lot of people are calling us in and saying, we're frustrated with one of those two because of XYZ. One of them, for instance, is a very closed ecosystem. So if you want to use bring your own verification tools, you may or may not be able to use them. And so what do you guys do? And so our tool set is very open. We're integrated with all those guys, just as an example. Every data provider, bring your own data. Whatever you want to do with data, we enable that within our platforms. Whatever you want to do with measurement or verification, we enable. So I don't know that we're necessarily combating that. I think we're actually more often than not, and I think over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll benefit more from it because people don't want all their eggs in one basket, and they're frustrated with, they're going to be, a company gets that big and there are going to be frustrations around it. So I'm not really poking holes at what those two are doing because I think they're executing really well. But I think there's certainly a window right now for another big player, or maybe two big players, to come in and be an alternative.
And you're hopeful that Oath will be it?
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to chime in on that. Actually, I agree with Jay. I don't think we're combating them.
So you're not going to be Oath?
No.
You don't want to be Oath?
No.
That's
we can work with them. But I think that, to Jay's point, where marketer strategies revolve around diversification, where you'll find some good ROI in a specific channel, say Facebook, and then you'll find specific challenges there, as he mentioned, around using your own data set or your own measurement. You can work with partners like us who do have scale and experiment there. So why limit yourselves? There's certain options for yourselves, and you have the experience to do so, and you should use whatever tools that you can leverage at this time to help you guys reach your goals. Secondarily, I agree with Jay as well that I think we're benefiting from it as a publisher. Case in point, Google is a huge partner of ours. They are our ad server, they are our SSP, they enable our programmatic pipes, they bring demand to us, the PMP demand and PG demand. And on the Facebook front, we're just starting to work with them on Facebook header bidding. So on mobile, they're going to be bringing in their own demand into our mobile environments. And I would venture a guess that's going to be an extension of their current channel that they would promote for you guys.
Well, let's explore it. Before we leave this point, I want to talk, and maybe Dana, you could talk about how and where you're differentiating specifically with those platforms. So when you come to market and you say, look, that's great. We love Facebook. They do a lot for us. But this is what we give you that they can't. In terms either of tool set, audience, environment. How do you come to market?
Sure. Audience and environment, just to start with. We know our audience quite well, and we frankly know them better than others will know them. We know how our content is consumed. We know who they are. They tell us who they are, and they tell us what they want. So just from the very beginning, it's audience. Environment. We're operating in an environment of trust. People trust us. They understand us. And we're a storytelling company. We create content for a living. It's what we do. So we can bring an advertiser story and our own story to the table on any platform. And so that's really a differentiator for us. We've also found, because we've done a lot of work around machine learning and predictive modeling, particularly for retailers, we're seeing that our first-party data outperforms what you would get buying straight from the platform. So it's the combination of those two data sets that we're seeing much higher performance on campaigns.
So I think one area that I would take this to reframe your question. I think the reason why those two companies are getting so much attention is because they've made it simple. And the trend that we're talking about, which is consolidation, is important because the landscape has been so confusing for buyers and sellers, but buyers in particular who've got 400 or 500 options and people coming to the table in order to, they're not as turnkey as a campaign on Facebook where you just log in and it's simple. You may have a limited tool set in some ways, but you have scale and it's simple and it's one person to do billing with, and you don't have to worry about the verification. You don't have to worry about some of the other things that you have to worry about in the open ecosystem. Now, I would say you do have to worry about fraud, but it's harder to detect and it's a different kind of fraud, which I think they've sort of gotten a pass on, which is another thing we can talk about as being unfair or that will come to light if it hasn't already. But I guess my point is consolidation is really, really important, because without consolidation, I mean, we don't want to compete with 300-400 other vendors. We want to compete. I mean, I'd be happy to compete with 5 or 6. No?
I'm just laughing. No.
But the issue, they've benefited tremendously from the lack of consolidation.
So this is where I disagree with you. I think competition is good. It's good for the marketers. You guys can get the best bang for your buck to partners who will exhibit this competition, right? So they would want to challenge the market leaders in the space. Technology is great. Yeah, I'm hoping that in the future, I think the panelists prior to here spoke about innovation. And I think that I personally look forward to really bold innovators out there in the space where technology can be leveraged to something new. Someone mentioned that something new could be coming in the future, and could be who knows. But I think that competition is great, and where we may agree is the efficacy of a marketer's strategies and how to execute their tactics around reaching their goals at scale. I think that's where the challenge is right now, whether it's from acumen to the actual platforms themselves enabling the correct executions for you guys, the correct optimizations, the correct levers. Maybe you guys are working with massive scale of partners, but you aren't able to activate your tactics because of, say, creative approvals on the DSP side. That is such a trivial thing that would completely put the brakes on a successful campaign when a creative approval on a DSP is the one thing that blocks you from leveraging a very innovative custom creative unit that would reach your audience in the correct context and the correct execution on the front end.
So competition is great. I didn't say competition was bad. I love competition. But take a step back. Let's look at the auto industry. Imagine if you went out to buy a car and you had GM and Toyota, and they were both really good cars. And then you had 400 other brands competing for and they weren't necessarily stitched together. You could buy another brand, but then you had to go find a steering wheel for it. GM and what did I say? Toyota, whoever, those are randomly selected. Whoever you want to choose, that's not competition when you've got 2 guys who have their stuff buttoned up, and then you've got 400 others who are VC funded, scrappy, disrupting for the sake of disrupting, sending out PR blasts that are untrue. That's not competition. That's inefficiency. So my point was, look at the auto industry today. What are there, I don't know, 10, 12 companies that matter? But then you got a Tesla that comes up and actually can disrupt and can do something different like what you're talking about. That doesn't block competition, but the problem is that with 400 or 500 vendors who are reliant on each other, competing with each other, send out conflicting PR blasts, focus the attention on fraud and viewability instead of the real issue, which is a connection to members or guests, that's where you have an issue. So I think I would like to see our industry be more like the auto industry. Maybe that number is 10 or 12. There's always going to be features. There's always going to be properties that matter outside of that. But without that, you have a really immature industry, and it's not competition. And that's why, in this example, the duopoly gets so much attention. It's just easier. It's simpler. And we got to fix that. And you can't fix that by having, my company, if we were still, I haven't counted, but 10, 12, whatever different media properties and data assets, if we were still competing with each other, I don't think we'd be compiling a competitive threat to those 2 big guys.
Dina, I'm curious, where does a Disney ABC sit in this argument between, say, that differentiation of tool sets and of media and of audience versus, as you point out, Jay, you're absolutely right. We've seen conglomeration, consolidation of buying, if for no other reason than convenience, right? You're sitting on brands that have been there forever and almost are sitting pretty in this argument, right? We're going to be here. We're going to be here now. We've been here for a long time. We know we're going to be one of the players.
We love everyone. That's our answer. No,
we're Mickey Mouse.
No, exactly.
Even Google?
What bad are we going to say about anyone? No, we embrace the partnership with anyone. We're open to the competition, and we're open to the consolidation to make things more efficient. But we want to partner with the best in class, whether it's around technology, around distribution.
Because you're in that privileged position of among those few legacy media brands that are not going to be watered down by any of this. Everybody's going to know
just
Disney
a media
and ABC.
brand. I mean, I go to Disney World,
right,
and you're a property, you're a
right,
real estate owner.
Right.
It's bigger than just
right.
a single.
That's exactly right. We're in such varied lines of business that, all joking aside, we really do love everyone, because for every different part of our business and each line of business, it has a different meaning for each line of business and is being leveraged differently.
Let me push back on the entire premise of these 2 days, which is people-based marketing, and where media brands fit into this. Because we started the day by having Motorola and Lenovo talk about argue a bit that a lot of the technologies, a lot of these approaches, and the duopoly is sort of at the core of this, a very data-driven, very performance-based, is really, in this people-based approach, is really pulling us away from that and skewing away from broader storytelling. And as media brands, I'm curious where you sit in this, how you push back and talk to media buyers about the limitations of this people-based approach. We're going down, and we have for the last 20 years been going down a path where the data, the numbers, the measurability, the accountability all drives us more towards performance rather than brand. And we now have a digital medium that seems, at least from Lenovo and Motorola's perspective, really sucks at building brands. So as media companies, how do you address this issue with your buyers?
I'll start with that. So I think you have to understand sort of the nuance between a people-based approach and an audience-based approach. And the math has to work. So people-based tends to sometimes imply a one-to-one, we know this person, it is this exact person, and we are marketing to them. Audience-based tends to think more holistically around, here are people with similar affinities. Here are people who behave like them, think like them, have interests that have some affinity there. And that helps to expand audience rather than sort of isolating and hyper-targeting. There's a place for hyper-targeting, but there's a conversation that has to happen between the publisher and the advertiser and the agency around what are you really trying to accomplish and how does the math work. Because if it's just people-based and it's a very finite, narrow target and a very specific goal, then there's a place for that. But if it's broader than that and you're trying to grow your brand and grow your audience and still accomplish a goal, you have to figure out how the math works and what data actually implies that you've had success.
Does your math show that you can build brands in your properties on digital channels?
Sure, and again, I mean, we're in a good position that we're sort of at the intersection of sort of brand and publisher and what all of that means. And so we're constantly building brand. We're continuing to grow brand and to grow trust, but to grow audience as well. So you just have to think through, how do you grow brand first? How do you then collect the data on those who were interested in your brand growth and were interested in the audience growth that you're pursuing? Collect that data and then retarget that audience as a part of the kind of people-based, audience-based targeting that you're looking for down the line. So you were talking earlier about kind of sequential messaging and what that means, and that's a huge part of it, is the broad message to the narrower message to the narrower message.
Jay, how do you do this with your brands? I mean, traditionally, Yahoo had been one of those brands for many years who had talked about the big branding potential. They had the portal, they had people that they could track and they could talk to in multiple instances when they had them within their environment, and brand was a very big part of the Yahoo story.
What's your measurement tool for brand building, or do you want me to answer it on sort of, because everyone has a different one?
Well, that's the point. I guess my question has a lot to do with how media brands are making the case for the brand building potential of digital.
Okay.
and whether it's being tapped.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
what their
digital
role is
early
in
on
doing
was
it.
kind of pigeonholed into direct response
Right.
performance because you have those metrics unlike any other medium, really.
Right.
I mean, you tackle it one by one, but I think there's some buyers who, feel like Nielsen or ComScore is a good benchmark. And so we use our technology or content assets to optimize towards that benchmark. So we got to figure out what's the benchmark. And I think that's one of the things that was easy with TV because of Nielsen and has been harder in digital. If we could come up with a barometer or a measuring stick by which we all agree that this is how brand is accomplished, I think it would be a lot simpler. But today, the way we deal with it is, what's your metric? What are you after in terms of, is it brand lift based on what? Mm-hmm. And then we optimize towards that, whether that's using our technology or assembling, more manually a content solution, a sponsorship. And if Verizon has a big partnership with the NFL, so if it's a metric around that, sometimes we're an extension of that too. So you're doing something offline, you want to bring it online or into the digital world. But I think the big challenge is that, again, like all this consolidation, no one's agreed on what does branding mean. So we've got 250 leading national advertisers and probably 50 or 60 different definitions of that. Right. That's the challenge.
Right.
And I don't know how a single vendor. I mean, I know how the duopoly does it. They say, here's the benchmark. But that's a very closed way of thinking. And I don't know that that's, scalable beyond their walls or, frankly, believable when you really start to question it or poke holes in it.
When you say here's the benchmark coming from Facebook and Google, can you elaborate? Do you know what exactly they're saying? Are they determining what the benchmark is based on their metrics?
Yeah, I think, no, I don't know exactly. I've never worked at either
I was
company,
just curious.
But Steve, you might.
No, I don't. And I'm not sure that they do that much.
Well, look, I think Facebook has a big partnership with Nielsen, right? So they've got their own definition of an audience index. When the rest of us sell video, it's against Nielsen. I know they have their own index. Is Facebook and Google here? I mean, are we just talking about the duopoly? And
No. Yeah, no, they're not here. We can talk about them.
Okay, good. Then,
say
then
whatever the
let's
hell
talk
you
about what's
want.
going on in
Yeah.
I don't know, frankly, what's going on in their business intimately, but I do know that they're making their own definitions of this stuff, which is bullshit.
From our end, we do exactly the same as you guys. So case in point, the math has to make sense. So from the initial strategy phase, we make sure that we measure and forecast from our scale of audience that overlap with your first-party CRM data. So we need to make sure that exists first, and we need to make sure that, before going live, that we have the avails for you guys to hit your goals. And secondly, how to measure the success of this based on the specific standard. Right now, Nielsen, every brand or advertiser or agency that are trying to do business with us or are doing business with us, they are promoting Nielsen as a measurement tool for the barometer for, I guess, the reach of their audience. So yeah, if there is one right now, it's Nielsen.
Sorry, and Google, just to comment on, since they're not here, they bought a company called Odometry, and Odometry has now been folded into their attribution suite. So I'm guessing, and I haven't seen the reports, but they have their own indexes on what media is successful and what's not, and it's completely based on a Google-owned proprietary system. So I don't think that's scalable for the rest of the industry, and I don't know exactly how to combat that. I'd love to learn.
On that, though, I think that one example right now that could possibly mirror where that's going, viewability. So Google has their own proprietary measurement called Google Active View. It's built into every single reporting tool for the ad server. And from my understanding, the current leader in the space for viewability is Moat. So I think where that came about was likely from the buy side, determining who their trusted partner is on the measurement piece. And you guys get to determine what that is. So hopefully you guys can give us some more feedback. And I think one of the questions from one of the earlier panelists earlier that I heard was, how can you guys better help inform and shape this discussion? And I think maybe just putting your voice stronger out there during the conversation pieces with your preferences and the challenges that you do face, and if it's around the notion of consolidation, of making things simpler for you guys, we'd like to hear that. From a publisher perspective, the more of that information we can hear and align with our strategies, we'd appreciate that, because then we won't waste time investing in technologies or partnerships that don't align with your strategies.
Before I go to my lightning round wrap, does anybody, and it's a good segue, does anybody in the audience have any questions of three very
Someone
different
from Google.
media
Yeah.
companies?
That one right here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have to.
Hey guys, it's Ari Rosenberg from IPC. How do you balance the discrepancy between respecting your users or guests or members, which I love that elevated term, and at the same time running really deceiving, crappy ads on your site? Like, you want to respect your users, but at the same time, a bad ad, like I saw on Yahoo yesterday, I'm sorry, Jay, but it was a medium rectangle on the homepage claiming that Clint Eastwood was dying. And then when you clicked on the ad, it was a link to a erectile dysfunction. So, like, you have to run ads, but you do have to respect your users, and I think bad ads get in the way of doing that. How do you balance that?
It's hard, right? Because you're playing the yield game as a publisher, and if that ED ad that I didn't get targeted, but
Sorry, I'm sorry. What he's saying,
Ari, why did you?
Ari, he's saying it's your fault.
Drop the mic.
below the belt, hey, you don't have the mic anymore. I got the mic. If that ad's going to pay 10, 12x what a brand safe ad or a good quote unquote good user experience ad will do, then you're playing the publisher yield game. But I think you're absolutely right, and that's why we're trying to come up with some sort of scoring metric so that it's not just about the highest bidder gets it. My guess is that's the highest bidder for that cookie at that time.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So, Ari, what he's saying is it was completely your fault. So,
Yes.
that's all right. And
Yeah, did I say something else?
yeah.
Yeah, just you.
From our end, we come at it holistically from a, I guess, positioning perspective. Everything has to be aligned from the top down, strategy-wise, whether it's organizational around a brand team and selling higher premium CPMs out there, which involve, by the way, creative services, managed service, targeting and forecasting of audience that measure along the best lookalike models, as Dana has mentioned earlier, and trying to carve out a yield portion of that with our inventory management, where we know where this is going to perform, hopefully, for your executions. And the leftover of that is something that we alleviate towards partnerships like header bidding and programmatic partners, in which case there's another set of skill set where we need to be very good at ad quality and measurement and environment, I guess, reaction time, where we measure the types and quality of ads coming from the programmatic pipes, where we don't always have the controls to, make sure that we don't have AdSense coming up with some really crappy ads that you don't want. So I think,
and that is a problem within the duopoly too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the stuff I've seen on Facebook in terms of the ad quality is some of it's good, some of it's terrible.
Yeah. So we work very much to ensure that we take a look at all channels of our business, which involve technology as well, and from partnerships to again, brand team positioning and brand alignment with both our brand and the buyer brands. We just make sure that we're paying attention to our environment, we're paying very close attention to our content curation, to the scale of our audience, their responses and feedback to us, both social and also from the influencer themselves. And we shift and we adapt very quickly, and technology is great like that. So one of the main advantages that we do have is that we do have that centralized framework. I consider us to be very agile in making those changes in real time. It could be a matter of, say, 24 hours, and we do find something that is a bad, I guess, ad network in the programmatic pipes. We do have a way to find out who that is, and we address it, and coming from the programmatic partner, and whether or not you're like me, who actually goes and like a pit bull to them and say, you have the worst ad quality team ever. Like, these are conversations we do have as a publisher. We make sure that we own and manage those pipes. We know what's going on there, and we pay attention to the feedback.
Dana, let's give you the last word from Mickey Mouse's perspective on quality of ads and serving erectile dysfunction ads to the wrong person.
Sorry.
Well, we don't.
Okay.
But historically, seriously, as a brand, it's just kind of who we are and something we're so careful about. So there's so many parameters and guidelines that have been in place with our company for years and years before we are even where we are today as in the advertising business and selling ads. So because we have those guidelines and parameters in place, it's something we're so careful about and something we just don't accept.
Are your properties open to bidding, to real-time bidding? Because
So-
I would guess that you wouldn't serve the ad, but it could. I'm guessing we didn't hand sell that ad that
Sure.
came through.
It depends on the property. So it really depends on who we're serving to, what we know that audience to be. And still, even in those cases, we're so careful around what's excluded and what's included, and we're carefully monitoring all the time. So if something happens to slip through, it's out immediately.
We have a really packed lunch, so I have to wrap our panel, but you can talk to all of them at lunch. Manny, Dana, Jay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve.